Good Thursday evening, Mike Naso here with the latest on the tropics. We have a lot to cover, so I'm going to get started on the screen here. In the Atlantic Basin, we have our Hurricane Fiona, a Category 4 hurricane, accelerating to the north-northeast now, taking aim at Bermuda and Atlantic Canada. On that image, here's the cold front pushing through the eastern U.S. That trough is helping to pick up the hurricane and shove it north-northeast, and it will impact areas of Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, and Labrador. We'll talk about that. We have Tropical Storm Gaston, which we now have warnings, tropical storm warnings for the Azores off Portugal, because it is forecast to move over them and cause tropical storm conditions. And of course, all eyes are on the Caribbean as our tropical invest here starts to show a little more life this afternoon. And as the sun goes down, it looks destined to become a significant hurricane and take aim at the Caribbean and eventually the United States. We also have an invest off Africa, one over Africa, as well as in the Pacific, what's left of Madeline, and tiny little Newton out there spinning about. We'll talk about all this. Here's the latest on Hurricane Fiona as of 5 p.m. Atlantic time. The hurricane was at 30.4 north, 69.5 west. Winds still 130. It's a Category 4, 936 millibar pressure. So the lower the pressure, the stronger the storm. By comparison, when Andrew hit South Florida as a Category 5, it was 922. So Fiona's 936, a far cry from that little innocent naked swirl over the Atlantic it was last week. It's moving north-northeast at 20. This time yesterday it was 8 miles an hour, remember? It has been picked up by that front that cooled the temperatures here in the eastern U.S. That front is saving America from the fury of Fiona. We do have a hurricane warning out for Bermuda because they can't be saved. They're out there and they're on the right side. They might get clipped by those tropical storm winds for sure, and possibly the hurricane winds because the wind field is expanding. That's even seen better. You can see the track here through time over the islands, over Puerto Rico, over the Dominican, over the Turks and Caicos, and then it crawled north. Now it's accelerating. It's going to bypass Bermuda just to the west and then slam into areas there of Nova Scotia, Labrador, Quebec, and Newfoundland. And we have hurricane watches in effect for those areas as well as tropical storm watches. Everybody needs to be on alert with this one because it is dangerous. Look at that wind field has expanded. So even though it hasn't gotten above 130, given a word to the wise, this type of hurricane is not something you want to mess around with. Look at that area there. I wanted to show some pictures. This is Newfoundland, Labrador. Look at how beautiful. These cyclones go to areas that are just gorgeous. Look at that country. Look at the red-headed girl running there along the beach. You want to see what I looked like when I was 17. That right there, I'll tell you. Here's Hurricane Fiona on the satellite. On the left side of the screen, there are the Bahamas. This is Abaco Island, and this is Eleuthera Island down here. And there's the eye of Hurricane Fiona accelerating now to the north-northeast. Looking a little bit better. It kind of looked a little ragged earlier, if a Category 4 could look ragged. It wasn't looking that impressive, but it's starting to look a little better as it accelerates, and sometimes interacting with the troughiness can actually help intensify a system in some ways. So that is a problem with Fiona because hurricane conditions are expected on Bermuda tonight through Friday morning, and it is expected to affect portions of Atlantic Canada as a powerful hurricane-force cyclone late Friday and Saturday, and significant impacts, winds, storm surge, rain, increasingly likely, and we have the hurricane and tropical storm watches in effect for most of Atlantic Canada. And number 3, large swells are going to cause life-threatening surf and rip conditions along the east coast of the U.S., the Bahamas, Bermuda, Atlantic Canada. Stay out of the water, okay? I'm a beach guy. I like it. Come on, it's the end of September. It's the East Coast. It's rocky shoreline, cold. Just put on a windbreaker and sip some coffee and look at the surf. But don't go in it because those rip currents can kill. Gaston out here as of 6 p.m. Greenwich time is at 41.1 north, 33.0 west, 65 miles per hour. It didn't become a hurricane. I thought there was a chance. It got close. East-northeast at 21 miles per hour, but it's going to come to a halt because this is motion just through the weekend. It's going to loop-de-loop here into some of the Azores, and we have tropical storm warnings in effect for those islands, the central Azores as well as the western Azores. They're off Portugal and Spain. It's not every day you see Portugal on a hurricane map, but it is today. I wanted to show more pictures. Some of these islands of the Azores are gorgeous. Look at this. This is like a Bob Ross painting. It is beautiful where this storm is, and you can see it doesn't look that good on satellite. It looked a lot better yesterday, but it's holding its own in the face of these winds here that are blowing it apart. You could even see this little protective barrier that the tropical storm put up in advance of those westerly winds, trying to fight off that shear. Tropical storm conditions are expected later tonight in the western Azores and will likely spread into the central Azores on Friday, and heavy rainfall, and that could cause landslides and areas of flooding. So if people are in those areas, you want to be on the alert with Gaston. Now, we're going to get to the Invest 98L here, the one that everybody's worried about in the United States for good reason. Here's the computer model showing that this system's going to move west-northwest, not do a whole heck of a lot until it crosses 75 west, and then south of Jamaica get going and become a hurricane, or even a strong hurricane, and take aim somewhere from the Yucatan and Louisiana all the way to western Cuba and South Florida. I know that doesn't help much, but the models do seem in a little bit better agreement that it will turn, and that's all going to be dependent on a trough moving through and weakening the ridge, and then how much steering flow it has if and when it gets up there. And if it doesn't have a lot, does it loop-de-loop in the Gulf until another trough comes in? Or if it has enough, does it just jettison right on into the west coast of Florida? Here's the satellite, and do you see the little naked swirl right here? I know it's not much to look at, but neither was Fiona, and now Fiona's a monster. There is some kind of low pressure with this system. It was over South America so much yesterday, I started to wonder, is it going to move over water? And yeah, sure enough, it spit right back out over the ABC Islands here, and with the areas we dealt with Bonnie. Remember back in, what was it, June, July? Tropical Storm Bonnie. But this system is expected to continue to the west-northwest and intensify. Here is the GFS model. This is as of 12Z. I'm going to put this into motion and watch the system pull on up. The GFS mills it for 4 days in the Gulf and then slams into the Florida Panhandle. Now, whether it's a Category 2 hurricane or a Category 4 hurricane or a Category 1 hurricane, does it really matter? That is a large storm. That would be very nasty impacts. This is the H-Wharf model, and this makes it a Category 4 hurricane in the southeast Gulf of Mexico after clipping western Cuba. It's kind of fast there, but you can see it makes it quite a beast. This is the HMON hurricane model, makes it a Category 3 hurricane directly over the island of Cozumel with the northern eye wall moving over Cancun, and that would be on the 27th on Tuesday. And then we get to the European model. The European model is bringing it over Cuba, then over the Florida Keys, and slamming into areas of the 10,000 islands as a significant hurricane sometime, that's fast, what is that date, on Tuesday or Wednesday. The Canadian model, not any better for you guys in Florida, brings it right on up in the same area and then into South Carolina, and that would be later on in the week by Thursday and Friday. So, the situation is we have a storm that models are in agreement is going to develop into a hurricane, maybe a strong hurricane, and make a turn towards the eastern Gulf Coast. So if I were in Brownsville, I'd feel a lot better than if I'm in Marco Island. I'll tell you that right now. Here are the ensembles, the European. Good agreement here, guys, that this thing is going to feel some kind of weakness and turn quick south of Cuba and strengthen. Here's the GFS, a little bit further to the west, a little bit more troubling for the Gulf Coast, but again, the same kind of idea here. Wind shear, look at these blues. This is low wind shear. It's not going to have to deal with it anymore. Fiona's moving up and out, and look at the environment here. It's going to have a very low wind shear environment, to say nothing of the hot waters that it's going to have over the Caribbean Sea. So all systems will be go for some strengthening as this system organizes. It's not there yet, but there's our Hurricane Fiona moving out, and it's not affecting it anymore with the wind shear, and you're immediately seeing it start to fan out a little and try and get better organized. It's still got a little shear, you can see that, but not like it had yesterday. So this thing is going to pull northwest, west-northwest, and develop. So we're going to watch it very, very carefully. Newton in the Pacific, as of 3 p.m. MDT, is at 18.0 north, 109.0 west, 60-mile-an-hour winds. It's a tiny little thing, little tiny baby out there south of the Baja. I don't even know if that's big enough to generate any surf. There's what's left of Madeline, and here is a tropical wave over the Pacific. But the main focus is going to become our system in the Caribbean. I didn't want to forget about off Africa. It's kind of out of sequence here. This is an invest looking rather dopey. This is one looking very good, and both of these should move to the west-northwest or the northwest, and another wave leaving Africa behind it, so the Atlantic tropics continue to look active. The most serious threat is Hurricane Fiona right now, a Category 4. Bermuda, you're under a hurricane warning. Atlantic Canada, hurricane watches. As this cold front sweeps up, sucks Fiona right up there. We saw devastation in the Caribbean. Let's hope they batten down the hatches up there. Azores, prepare for gusty winds and rain from Gaston. But as the days wear on through the weekend, the gears will be shifting here to this system, Invest 98L, that will eventually likely become a tropical depression, then a tropical storm, then a hurricane, then potentially a dangerous major hurricane as it takes aim at areas here of the Yucatan, Cuba, the Caymans, Jamaica, Florida, maybe the Gulf. We'll keep an eye on it. I'm Mike Naso with the latest on the tropics. Please like, subscribe, share, and I'll be back with continuing coverage over the next couple of days. I have a feeling we're going to need it with this system in the Caribbean.